If you are watching this video on April 1st, 2022, then this is the first day of the 30-day chart challenge. What is the 30-day chart challenge? Well, it's a challenge that's hosted on Twitter, and I did it last year, all 30 days, all 30 graphs. It's a challenge that's sort of fun because the idea is to post some general categories of graphs that you can create, but ultimately the data that you use and what you do with it is really up to you. The idea is just to stay within a specific theme and get to see what other people create, and it's kind of a fun thing to do. So I wanted to show you how I make graphs within DataGraph. I think DataGraph is an excellent platform for this type of creating graphics like this, because you typically can create the basic graph pretty quickly, and then the fun part of figuring out what colors and fonts and sizing and line thickness and point sizes and all that is very interactive and easy to do, and easy to also just create different versions of your graph and see which one is going in the direction that you really like. The theme for today is part to whole. My original idea is to look at the number of PhDs in Chapel Hill, the home of the UNC Tar Heels, and there are a lot of people with advanced education around here. Specifically, I was thinking in PhDs. I could not find that specifically, but what I did do is I went into the US Census and I was able to find the number of people with different levels of education. And what I wanted to, again, highlight was the population with graduate or professional degrees. So on the right-hand side of this graph, you can see that 49% of Chapel Hill, this part of my, what I'd call my donut graph, is in that category. This also gives you the total population count. This is specifically to people 25 years or older. I wanted to compare that to another location, so I picked our friends over in Cupertino, California. This is the headquarters of Apple. 46% with graduate or professional degrees, as you can see here, and a somewhat similar population. I actually thought it might be a lot different than Chapel Hill, but not too different. A little bit larger, clearly, but more similar than I had necessarily expected to be. Okay, so what am I going to teach you in this video? Well, I'm going to show you basically how I created this graph, the process for that, and talk a little bit about how, DataGraph can help you make something like this pretty quickly, where really you don't start with something that looks like this. You start with something that's more basic. This is an example of a file that's actually in the DataGraph online example files. This is a list of all different files that are available to you. Actually, here's the full list, and it's filtered into different categories. This one, the side-by-side donut charts, is something that we recently put in the layout category, and thought it would be useful to illustrate how you can use a file like this that, again, gives you some basic building blocks, and then you can add upon that to create something a little bit more sophisticated that, expresses a particular idea with your data. So with that, again, I'll show you the basics of how this file actually is created. I'll show you how to get the census data that I used to create this. It's very easy to bring that into the program. And then I'll show you some information on how I actually created this graph. So as I said, let's start with the really basic file in order to just show you a little bit about how this is created so you can understand how to use the file a little bit better, I think. First of all, there's 3 columns here. There's a column that's a text column. This contains the labels that you see around these donut charts. And then we have 2 number columns, where the first number column is used as the basis for this chart here, and then the second number column is used as the basis for the second chart. So how do we create these just in general? Let me go ahead and do this in a new file, actually, just to really show you the basics here. I'm going to select my first column, hold the Shift key to select all of this data, and edit, copy, and let's put this in a new file to really show you from scratch how this is done. Okay, so in my brand new file, I'm going to use the pie command. Click the draw menu. You'll see pie, create a pie or donut chart with a single column of data. click add. And when you do that, that adds this object that has a variety of different menus and options associated with it. The first one that we would want to change here is the values, picking the value column that goes into this chart. And then the names, we can pick the name of the, that's going to be the label around the chart itself. We can also change it to display the name and the percent. And there you have kind of the basics. Now, how do I make this a donut? Well, there are two sliders here that change the size. You can change the total size, and then you can also change or add in a hole into this donut. Now, all of these entry boxes can also be typed in directly, so I can just type in the size for that. And just to show you a real quick shortcut to create any of these, you can also pre-select your data. So if I just, again, hold down the Shift key, select these two columns, say draw, add pie, it's already populated with the data. I can do the same thing. Now the columns aren't next to each other, so I can hold the Command key and say draw. Here we go, pie. And now they're actually drawn on top of each other. So how do I split these two apart? Well, I can do that using what we call a split axis. So to do that, you'll notice up here there's a button that says Split X. Click on that. And when you do, each object now has or the command objects have a icon on the right-hand side that you can very interactively move them from one side to the other side. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to uncheck all of these buttons here. These are allowing you to draw numerical values on the X and Y axis for the graph. We're not going to have any X and Y axis here, but it is adding a little bit of a buffer in the margin for that. So just uncheck all of those, and then you'll have a clean slate, so to speak, for each of these. Now, in the file itself, what we did was we added a bunch of variables to make it easier for you to change the size of these and keep them the same. So if I just add a variable here, down here is where you can add various types of variables. We'll call this the size variable. And I can have this go, say, from 10 to, I don't know, 100 pixels or something like that. You can use the slider. That just changes the value. It's not being used anywhere yet. If you want it to be an integer, you can check that button. But in this entry box, you not only can type in numbers, but I can type in my variable. So I can just do size there. Now when I change this, the two of them stay the same. So very handy. Another thing that I just wanted to point out to you is that there's a total value given within the charts that are in the example. And to do that, we're also using a variable. This is called a number from column variable type. If you right click on any of the number columns, you will see an option for number from column and all the different variables that you can pick from. Let's pick the sum. And we'll do the same thing for this one. That creates my two variables that I now want to show as a label within my graph. So to do that, there are a number of different commands that are specific to annotating and adding labels. I'll click this to show you these here. The one I'm going to use is the text command. So you can go ahead and click add. And everything you're adding adds another object here that represents it and has its options. Once it added, you can see there's the text. Again, this is something I can drag around. But what I want to show you is how do I have the sum here, the number 15, for example, showing in this text command. Now I can say total and I can say equals, but I want this to be interactive. I don't want to just type in 15 because then if I change my data, that doesn't update. So to make it interactive, what I want you to do is you'd click over here on the right-hand side, and this works for any text entry box for other titles and things as well. So when you click that, a menu will pop up showing you the available items that you can place there. And sum for chart 1 is one of those items. Click that. And when you do, it's going to place this blue, it looks almost like a pill, that's a token, hit enter to apply. I actually had my text so highlighted when I did that, so it deleted the total. So anyway, there it is. Now you can see total is equal to sum of chart number 1. Now again, like these other things, once I've created this, I don't necessarily have to start from scratch every time. I can also copy the actual command. Once I have it selected, paste it again. Now I have 2 of these. Place this one on this other side, and but I don't want to have the total from from chart 1, so I'll delete that token and add from chart 2 and hit enter, and now you have this total here. What's great about this is then that this is very interactive. If I add more data and enter more numbers, this is all changing. So my totals will change, my pie charts will change, and I'll keep everything, again, automatically updating my graphics. Now, the other thing that I wanted to point out to you that's done within the example file is it makes heavy use in the final kind of formatted example of the style settings. So let me show you what the style settings are. And to do that, let's shift focus a little bit here. I want to hide my definitions. And I also want to swap the view. So we'll put our, there we go. And you just select view, swap layout, and then you can get the commands here on the left-hand side. So the one I want to focus on is this top one. If you hover, it gives you a description, the style settings. And if you open this up, this gives you a list of font categories. You have XY title font, axis font, and label fonts. And for example, the commands that I created here, if you expand them, you'll see where there is a font option here for specifying the font for this label, but it is set to the label category. What's nice about that is that I could change the font here within this object directly if I only wanted to change this specific label. But what if I want to change them both at the same time? Well, I'm much better off at doing that in the style settings. So if I, for some reason, wanted my labels to be red, for example, that's also changing my labels around my pie chart itself. I can also make them larger. I can also do what's called setting my own local font. So maybe I don't want to style these labels the same as the labels around my pie chart. Well, I can change, for example, the text commands to use the local style. Notice how that made that go back to black here. And if I, again, you can see there, here's a local font category. This is where you can make your own kind of custom edits to what the font styling is. So if you wanted this to be much larger than the labels around the pie charts, it helps you to do that in a way that, again, it's very interactive. You can see it, and it's very convenient for something like this where you definitely would want these to be the same. Now, hopefully that gives you just a little bit of the sense of some of the components of this. Now let's go back to the file that's in the online examples and examine that a little bit more carefully. Okay, so here we have the basic file that you see here with just the 2 donuts that are formatted in the way that we talked about. There's some information here about the split axis. So a lot of these files have descriptions. They have links to help pages with more information. And in particular, this tells us that there are 3 slider variables that are set up here. And again, these are on the left-hand side. So the radius of the chart, the center of the chart, and we also added an offset that you can change as well. And notice how when I'm changing these, everything is changing, and even in both graphs. It shows you where these options are located within the pie commands, and here's the commands themselves. Now, if you look at the one that's formatted, there's a couple of big differences here. One thing that is very different is that the size is specified. This is going to be really important for creating something that we want to post in social media. This is posted to 7 inches by 4 inches. We'll talk about more how you can change that to customize that. But now the graph doesn't change as I move these sliding bars. You can zoom it in and out. So that's an option. You can set it to actual, which will show you a graph that is, in fact, exactly 7 inches by 4 inches on your screen, if that's what you have typed in. But again, we talked about these style settings. So if you go into here, you'll see the XY title font. This, if I change it, you can see what is set to that group. So actually, another way would be just to change the color temporarily, just to see, okay, what's being controlled by that XY title font. My offset here is a little bit too high, so I can move these back down again. And again, the local font is also being used to control. Here we have the inner label set to the local font, and the label font itself is also downsized a little bit. So this is just a handy way to kind of set the relative sizing for the fonts themselves. Again, the overall font is up at the top. You can see how things change quite a bit as I move that around. The other thing I wanted just to point out to you is the font for the title. So you see how here there's a title. If you expand this open, then you'll see that there is a specifically just for the title font, there's some options for that within what we call the canvas settings. And within the canvas, I have the title font still set to the main font, which in this graph right now is Helvetica, and it's set to 80% greater than whatever the value is here, just to make that title pop. So this gives us the basics that we're going to work with to create our graph. And now I'll show you how you can get the data in here and start updating this. Okay, next part of this video, I'm going to show you how to get the data. I'm on the US Census website, and I'm looking for data on education. And very quickly, when I came searching here, I found that there was an option for educational attainment that sounded like what I was looking for. Sure enough, here's a table from the American Community Survey on educational attainment. And it's actually pretty easy to use. You have a table here with data, and specifically the data I'm interested in is this population 25 years and older, and you can see how it contains information on different levels of education, including the graduate or professional degree. What I wanted to do was to filter this for just Chapel Hill, and you can do that using this Geos button here. So if you click that, then you get an option for adding this specific filter. And for me, what I wanted to add a filter on is a place. So I'm specifically asking for Chapel Hill, for example. When you do this, you do need to say, okay, first, what state are you in? So I'm going to pick North Carolina. And now I'm going to say, I gotta scroll. It's too bad there's no way that I can see to actually start typing the name of the town. So you have to do a little bit of scrolling to get there. Oh, where am I? I know it can. So there we go. Chapel Hill, North Carolina. This is the one I want. And now that I've done that, what you see over here is that it shows you that the filter's been added, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. If you want to remove the filter, then you actually click the little X over here, but this is the filter I want. So instead, I'll just click over here to remove that interface. So the filter has now been applied to my data, and you can see how it gives you the estimate, also gives you a margin of error. What's really nice about this is I can click and select my data. I can also select my labels within this sheet. And then if you want to just do a right click or control click and try copying with headers. And now we're going to go back to DataGraph, and I'm going to select my 2 columns, hold the shift key, and just do edit, paste. And that was pretty easy. My data is now within DataGraph. So there's the data is there now for chart 1. Now this is not exactly what I want it to look like. It actually, let's see, it put in some extra text into the name of the header. I just wanted to say Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And in fact, I want it to say Chapel Hill, NC. Now, if you remember, actually, in my final version, I actually put Chapel Hill in chart 2. So let's go ahead and put that there. And then I went ahead and copy and pasted the data also for Cupertino. So that's easy enough. We'll go ahead and add that now. So now that I've pasted in my data, you can see, well, there's a couple of issues with the graph, the way that it looks. But one of the things that I wanted to verify was that my totals were correct. Again, these all updated dynamically. I didn't have to do anything else. The file's already all set up to do this. And if you go back into the census data, you can see, for example, for Chapel Hill, this population, again, the total 31,171, and this is exactly what I'm showing within DataGraph as the sum of this column. Perfect. So what I want to do now is obviously add a little bit more styling to this, make this look correct, and also have the labels not overlapping each other. The way in which I work in DataGraph all the time is to clone a graph. So I might want to say, all right, this doesn't quite look like what I want, but let's just make a new copy to work in. And you can do that by going to the thumbnail of the graph, and up in just above the left corner, there's a clone button. Click that, and now you've made a copy of this graph. So I can maybe leave one the way it is just in case I mess something up, and go now to this one. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do, since I know I'm going to be posting this on Twitter, is I want to set the size of my graph correctly. So right now it is a specified size, but it's not the size I need. For Twitter, you actually want to have a size that's 1200 by 675. Now, I know this because I've done it many times. I also have created that as one of my custom options in this gear menu. So when I click this, I have an option of 1200 by 675. You would have to type this in, and if it wasn't already in your menu, you'd be able to add it to the menu there. So now that you have that set, what you'll notice is, wow, this looks very large. That's because this is a lot of pixels. It is a large size. When we view this, we would not want to view this maybe as actual, but usually on my screen, 50% lets me see the whole image that I'm going to put on Twitter that you can see here. So a couple of things right away is I had a 12-point font here. That's kind of a small font. I'm going to want to make that much larger, maybe even a little bit bigger than that. Again, you can kind of interactively do that. I also am going to want to change the sizes of my graphs here, right, to make that size appropriately. What else do I want to do? Well, I'm going to want to make the labels actually be quite a bit smaller. And there's a couple of things that I would want to do. One is going into your style settings. And first of all, I think it's the label font that's controlling these. Yep, it is. So we can leave them the same color, but let's make them even smaller. Really, the focus of this is not so much on being able to read the labels, but on being able to see the numbers the way that I had it set up. I might want to make this a little bit smaller overall, or possibly make these labels a little bit bigger. So these text commands, I think these are, let's see, are these controlled by the local font? No, that's the inside. There we go. This is the XY title font. So a couple of other things. One thing I might want to do is change the colors. This is something that we do in DataGraph in terms of the overall graph. We can do this within the canvas settings. So if you open up the canvas settings, you'll see options for, what do you want, the background color, the axis background. And for this, what I did was I added a background color, and I used kind of a light blue. I didn't use actually that exact color. We can go into the color picker, but I just want to show you the basic approach. But the inside color, I wanted to be something, I just left that as white. A couple of other things. I want to have a different title here. So you can double click to change what the title is. And I called this, let's see, I can actually just copy from my data table. I can copy that text and, oops, try this one more time. Copy, go back into my pop-up here and place the title there. Notice when I'm changing this here, it's also changing here. So it is something you can edit from either location. You can double click on the graph, or you can go up into the Canvas settings themselves and type it in. Now what I did in my final version is I actually had this as two lines, and there's a trick to doing that. So I'm going to type in percentage of population with, I think I did something like that. Now if I just do that, it's going to be too long, but there is a way to just use a code, a \n. If you type that within your text and hit return, now we'll see the title be a two-line title. So there's no way in the text commands, actually you can add multiple lines that you can see. Here, if you just add the \n, then you go ahead and it will give you that two title. Let's see, what else do I want to do here? Well, I want to have my colors now for my pies, or my donuts to be different. And I also want to adjust where things are located. So to do this, let's go ahead again and do a swap on the location of everything. And let me change this in a couple of different ways. Let's expand. You can see here, actually, I guess if you're new to the program, all the commands now here have been grouped because there's multiple items that are being drawn on either axis. So you have the title, you have the pie or the donut itself, and then you have the text command here. So, and notice when I click on any of these, it highlights the object that's being controlled, or the object that is specifying what is going within my graph at that location. So to change the colors here, we can go ahead and expand this command, and you notice there's all these different tiles that are kind of repeating in 4 cycles, or 4 times over the colors that are coming from our style settings. I can actually use the presets here to pretty quickly get a list of other colors that I might want to add. And in this case, what I did was I started with the grays. And then I decided for this that, again, I really wanted to highlight the difference between the percentage with the graduate or professional degree. So to do this, I actually played a little bit with the rotation of the graph itself. Let's see, here we go, this way. So that we could get the graduate or professional degree in this corner and have, I think I ended up with about 133 as the angle, and then to highlight specifically that slice. So each one of these color tiles, you can click and change what the color is, but you can also click the color tile itself and drag it in between. So what I did was just decide that all of the tiles would be the same color except for this last one. But let me keep going with the colors for the second one. And when I did this one, I actually looked up the appropriate hex code for UNC blue. So if we go online and we just go ahead and do that and type in hex code for UNC, and there, sure enough, there it is. So we can copy this code, and this will be an easy way for me to put this within my donut here. So first thing, it's a blue, so I can choose blues just to kind of get within the right family. But this last tile here, this needs to be something other than this really dark blue. So if you click on the menus next to it and then go to the color picker, And within the color picker, if you go to this section where you have RGB sliders and look right down here, here is an option to enter the hex code. So I'm just going to paste in that code that I copied. And that means that this specific slice is going to be that nice shade of UNC blue that I'm going for here. And all the other slices I want, again, to be a much lighter shade of blue. So I could go ahead and change those to, again, just drag and drop. And now those are all the same color. I'm going to want to change this again in the same way I did here. I actually modified this to be clockwise and change the orientation of this about 133. There we go. Okay, so let's try and finish this up. We can change the line style to instead be a black line. We'll change this to be a white line in between each of these for both of them. So if I expand out both of my commands here, change the line style to white, then that gives me this, kind of a nice look. Now, one of the things that I also want to do is I actually want this background color to match the color here. One kind of quick way to do that actually is just to go into my, not the style settings, into the canvas settings, and I can go to the, where I set the background color and choose the color picker, and then just drop right on. So I just click here, get the color picker, go to where I want to use that color, and now those two colors will match. So that can be just handy sometimes just to do it that way. And let's see, and I want to, again, let's go ahead and get these labels adjusted properly. So one thing that I did in my final version is to shorten some of these labels. And to do that, we can go ahead and let's add show the data menu again on the side. You can do that by clicking this button here. And where I have the text label, let's go ahead and just hold the Option key, drag it down. That makes a copy of it. And this will be what I'll call my short label. And we can, again, just shorten some of these labels. And notice this is exactly what's on the graph. So when I'm changing these, that's going to change the graph. Oh, well, I haven't selected them yet. So I do need to actually select them within my commands. Hide this data view again. And instead of the label, we use the label short. And we'll do the same thing here, use the label short. So now we're starting to get something that looks a bit better here. And I want to go back to my sizes of the pie itself and sort of shrink these down a bit. I'm also going to make this label a little bit shorter, and using this trick that I showed you earlier, adding the \n, I can even do that when my labels are coming from the data table, and then the label here for graduate or professional degree goes on 2 lines. Now for this graph, again, this text is small. If you want to look at it, you certainly can zoom in and see this when the final graph is done. But my point of this was really to highlight more this particular slice of it. So a couple of other things to do here. One is now that I've shortened my label titles, I can adjust my size of my donuts again and actually make them a little bit larger. That'll also help to separate some of these category labels that are a little bit overlapping will be separated a little bit better. I want to make sure I can make sure the offset radius for each of these is exactly the same, so they're comparable. That's this value right here that I sort of played with. I want that to be the same on both of my graphs. I guess another thing that I did was I made this font a little bit smaller, And this is, again, if you click on it, then it will, assuming the group is open, it will highlight where that command is. You can always check to see what type of font this is using. This is using a local, or what we call the local font. So if I go back up into all the way up to my style settings, if I want my local font to maybe be a little bit smaller, then I can go ahead and change that as well. So what else did I want to do? Well, the offsets here would be a little bit less. And in my final version, I added in the percentage within a text label here as well. To do that, I need to actually pull what the percentage is. Now, again, I could just type in, if I go to this text label, let's see where this is, and you expand this text command object out, there's a place here where this line is shown. I could type this in as, what is the percent, as what you see here, 46%, and enter that, and then you'll see it there, but that's not necessarily dynamic. So there is a way to actually go ahead and pull a specific number from a row in our column. So I want to do something that's a little more sophisticated than just typing in the 46%. I can show you how to make this also dynamic. And to do that, what we're going to do is actually extract the percentages that are calculated in these pie charts, because you can see there's all these numbers calculated here, and put these back into the data table. So to do that is actually something that I can do pretty quickly. I can go over to my pie chart itself, and notice that on the top right-hand corner on this command, there's a gear menu. You can extract as column the percentages. And when you do that, a couple of things happened, right? First of all, my data menu on the left-hand side popped up again to show me that you just added an object here for this new percentages column. And let's see, let me go ahead and add now the second one. Make this a bit smaller here and extract this one as percentages. So now we have the percentages for both Cupertino and Chapel Hill within my data table. And I just have to do that in order to be able to use these again as dynamic labels. So let's go ahead and go over to my section over here where I have my variables, and I can add a number from column variable. And the column here is going to be the percentages. You can actually click and drag the title or use the menu, but either will work. And I'm going to get the value at a particular row, and I want it at index 7. So that's going to give me this exact percentage. So here will be my percent for Cupertino, and then I can just hold the option key while I drag this, and now select the second percentages column, which I know is the percentage from Chapel Hill. And I probably want to change the names of these columns to indicate that, but for now, I just want you to see how I can make these a variable, because once they are a variable, I can go back into the text command that has this label, and let's see, here it is. So again, instead of typing this in, I can go ahead and say I want this to be the token that has the percentage for Cupertino, and we'll do the same thing with the second set of commands. So what is left here? Well, one thing I often do when I'm kind of in between is use the Command A shortcut to select all these commands, and then a left arrow key to just collapse everything down again. This has these comments in here which actually don't necessarily need them anymore, so I think I'll just delete that to make it a little bit cleaner. So if you want to add another label in the bottom margin, one thing I'd probably do first is just expand this margin, and that I can do within my Canvas settings. If you expand these out, you'll see margin below as one of the options. I could make this maybe 100 points, And then I have enough room there. I don't know, maybe that's more than I need, maybe 80. And then add a text command that has, let's see, here's the text. This looks tiny here, but we're going to use maybe a different style here, or just can make this, oops, not smaller, make this larger so you can see what I've got here. And I don't want this inside the graph itself. That's what this where setting is. It says I'm putting this text inside the X and Y domain within this, which is the white part of the graph right now. Let's go ahead and put this in the figure, first of all. So now it's out of the XY domain. It's anchored to the upper left. I actually want this in the lower left. And then we can just move this up a bit to get it off of that spot, and then just type in whatever my source information is here. I can take this command, and instead of starting from scratch, since I had my Twitter handle over here on the right hand side, I can option drag this and now have this one instead on the right hand side, we'll put this on the right hand side, align it to be right justified with that location, and then I can type in here as well. So this would be my Twitter handle, and then again I can put all my source information here as well. Now another thing you might want to do is also change the style of this number. That's one thing that I'd probably want to do, to have a comma in between. So if you do that, you can actually just double click on either of these numbers. That will give you the token shortcut. When you click on the right hand side of that token, it gives you a format menu where you can go ahead and click a format, hit enter for that to apply, and then you see that final formatting there. And here is the final graph that I did. Actually, the title, I guess I have it a little bit shorter here, population with graduate or professional degrees. How do I take this now and put this on Twitter now that I'm pretty satisfied with what this looks like? Well, what I want to do is export this, and I can go ahead and export my graphic. And when you do, you're going to see an option of what type of file you export it as. We can do this, for example, as a PNG. And what I would do is have the resolution be set to 72 dpi. And when you do that, you will be creating a file that is exactly those measurements that you put in that 1200 by 675. And then that's the file that you can go ahead and post on Twitter. I hope that this was a helpful demo for you, and I look forward to seeing what graphs you create for the 30-day chart challenge.